Breaking tonight, Canada's battery manufacturing strategy just transformed from partnership to permanence. Stellantis didn't abandon Windsor, they revealed the endgame. And Canada's recent policy shifts align perfectly with exactly this outcome. Competition is intensifying in North American manufacturing tonight. Stellantis announced its complete exit from Nexstar Energy's ownership structure. But instead of industrial retreat, Windsor's battery factory just locked into growth mode, with South Korea's LG Energy Solution taking full control. Everyone believes Stellantis leaving meant failure. Financial analysts expected production cuts within weeks. Industry observers assumed the $15 billion in government subsidies was now at risk. Union representatives braced for layoffs. They were all utterly incorrect. Windsor, Ontario this morning. Standing before reporters, Nexstar CEO Danny Lee made a statement that clarified everything. This new ownership structure strengthens Canada's position as a leader in battery manufacturing. It provides long-term certainty to continue investing in our Canadian workforce. Translation: the automaker just left. The battery manufacturer just committed. And Canada's industrial strategy, the one recent government policies have emphasized around manufacturing independence, just locked into place exactly as designed. Dear viewers, let me take you back to March 2022. That's when Stellantis and LG Energy Solution announced their joint venture. 51% LG, 49% Stellantis. Canada's first large-scale battery manufacturing facility. Windsor cheered. Ottawa committed billions. Everyone celebrated the automotive partnership. But here's what the headlines missed. This was never about cars. This was about batteries. And the difference between those two industries explains everything happening right now. Stellantis builds vehicles. Their business model requires selling cars to consumers in a market that's now collapsing for electric vehicles. When EV demand drops, automakers panic. They scale back. They pivot. They abandon long-term investments for quarterly survival. LG Energy Solution manufactures batteries. Their business model supplies energy storage to whoever needs it. Grid systems, automotive, industrial applications. When one market softens, they expand into others. When automotive EV demand dropped in late 2024, Nexstar didn't panic. They pivoted to grid storage systems. November 2025, that announcement happened. Batteries made at the Windsor plant would now be prioritized for power grid storage systems, not primarily the automotive industry as originally promised. Industry analysts called it a retreat. Union members worried about job security. Critics questioned the government's subsidies. Canada's recent strategic positioning saw it as confirmation. Because here's what that pivot actually meant. Stellantis, tied to the automotive market, faced a business environment where electric vehicle mandates were collapsing across North America. Canada just scrapped requirements for 60% EV sales by 2030. The United States offered inconsistent federal support. Consumer demand plateaued below projections. For an automaker, that's a crisis. For a battery manufacturer, that's a Tuesday. LG Energy Solution looked at the same market conditions and saw opportunity. Grid storage systems need batteries at massive scale as renewable energy expands. Data centers need backup power systems. Industrial facilities need energy independence. The battery market isn't shrinking, it's diversifying. And Windsor's factory, with 1,300 employees today and capacity for 2,500, sits at the center of that opportunity. So when Stellantis announced this morning they were selling their 49% stake to LG for a nominal fee, they weren't abandoning an investment. They were acknowledging reality. Their automotive-focused business model couldn't justify the long-term commitment that battery manufacturing requires. LG's business model demanded exactly that commitment. The lock-in. This is where Carney's strategy reveals itself. When Ottawa committed up to $10 billion in production subsidies and Ontario added another $5 billion. Critics focused on the automotive jobs. Conservative MPs like Kyle Seaback are already calling today's news significant, questioning whether the government backed the wrong industry. They're asking the wrong question. The question was never how many cars would be built. The question was whether Canada could secure permanent manufacturing capacity in the energy storage industry that will define the next 3 decades. Stellantis remaining as a partner meant Nexstar was vulnerable to automotive market volatility. Every quarterly earnings call, every shift in EV consumer demand, every change in corporate strategy could threaten Windsor's factory. LG taking full ownership removes that vulnerability entirely. Look at what LG just acquired: a fully operational battery manufacturing facility with government subsidies guaranteeing production economics. A workforce of 1,300 skilled employees with growth potential to 2,500. A strategic location in southern Ontario with access to North American markets. A partner government committed to industrial growth. And here's the detail that matters most. Stellantis remains a committed customer. They will continue to source battery products from Nexstar, but now they're one customer among many potential clients, not the majority owner determining production strategy. Translation: Canada just converted an automotive captive factory into an independent battery manufacturer with South Korean backing and government support. That's not a sale, that's a lock-in. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkins called LG a cornerstone of the region's manufacturing ecosystem. That language matters. Cornerstones don't leave. Cornerstones don't pivot based on quarterly earnings. Cornerstones build for decades. Nexstar currently employs roughly 1,300 people. The long-term target remains 2,500 employees. Ontario's Economic Development Minister, Vic Fedeli, confirmed this transfer in ownership will not lead to any job losses at the facility. But let's talk about what job growth in battery manufacturing actually means. These aren't assembly line positions dependent on consumer auto sales. These are advanced manufacturing jobs in energy storage technology. When grid storage demand increases, employment increases. When new battery technologies develop, Windsor's facility expands capacity. Unifor Local 444 President James Stewart understood this immediately. He told reporters that decoupling from Stellantis ownership allows Nexstar the opportunity to add additional lines with new technologies in the facility that allows them to adapt for new customers. Read that again. Additional lines, new technologies, new customers. Companies like Toyota and Honda and Ford may not have been interested in buying a product that's got ownership by Stellantis, Stewart explained. This decoupling allows Nexstar to compete for contracts across the entire automotive industry, plus grid storage systems, plus any other battery application that emerges. That's not 2,500 jobs dependent on one automaker's success. That's 2,500 jobs anchored in battery manufacturing capacity that serves multiple industries. Now let's connect this to the larger pattern. Canada's recent policy shifts have spent 18 months positioning the country away from resource extraction dependence and toward advanced manufacturing capacity. The conversations with South Korea, the focus on battery supply chains, the emphasis on manufacturing jobs over resource jobs, this wasn't random, this was systematic. When Canada and South Korea signed their auto manufacturing partnership last week, Industry Minister Melanie Joly made the logic explicit. I'm saying that we will invest in those who invest in us. What are we seeing this week? LG is buying out Stellantis to invest more in Canada. That timeline matters. Partnership announcement, immediate investment commitment. This is what strategic relationship building produces. South Korea didn't buy into Nexstar despite Stellantis leaving. They bought full ownership because the partnership created conditions for exactly this outcome. Canada's government didn't choose the automobile. They chose the battery. And by securing South Korean manufacturing commitment through government partnership, Windsor's factory just locked into growth mode, independent of automotive market chaos. Here's what's happening across the North American automotive industry right now. Stellantis announced massive scale-back of electric vehicle ambitions on the same day as this ownership transfer. Their shares plunged 25%, the lowest since the company was created in 2021. That's automotive volatility. That's the industry Stellantis needed to escape from when evaluating long-term manufacturing investments. Meanwhile, LG Energy Solution just committed to full ownership of Canadian battery production capacity, with government subsidies securing economics and a workforce pathway to 2,500 employees. That's manufacturing stability. That's the industry Canada just locked into for the next 3 decades. Conservative critics are demanding the government remove the tax on Canadian-made vehicles and eliminate the industrial carbon tax on auto manufacturers. They're fighting yesterday's battle. The automotive manufacturing model that depended on government subsidies to sell cars to reluctant consumers is collapsing across North America. The battery manufacturing model that supplies energy storage to grid systems, data centers, industrial facilities, and yes, multiple automakers, is accelerating into the exact market conditions that favor Canadian production. Dear viewers, between March 2022 and February 2026, something extraordinary happened in Canadian industrial strategy. Ottawa committed $15 billion in subsidies. Stellantis and LG built a factory. The market shifted. Automotive demand weakened. Grid storage opportunity expanded. And instead of retreat, instead of scaling back, instead of questioning the investment, South Korea doubled down. LG didn't buy Stellantis out because Nexstar was failing. They bought them out because the factory's potential extends far beyond what automotive partnership could capture. When you're manufacturing batteries for grid systems, you're not dependent on consumer car preferences. You're supplying infrastructure that every jurisdiction needs as they transition energy systems. Canada just secured that manufacturing capacity with South Korean commitment and government backing. This is the pattern recent Canadian policy has been building. Not resource extraction hoping for price stability, not automotive assembly dependent on consumer trends. Advanced manufacturing in the technologies that define energy transition, with strategic partnerships that provide stability. Windsor's battery factory just became Exhibit A. Stellantis CEO Antonio Filosa called this a smart, strategic step that supports our customers, our Canadian operations, and our global electrification roadmap. He's not wrong. For Stellantis, exiting battery manufacturing ownership to focus on vehicles makes perfect sense. For Canada, securing full LG commitment to battery manufacturing makes even more sense. Because 18 months from now, when grid storage demand continues accelerating and Nexstar approaches that 2,500 employee target, the question won't be, why did Stellantis leave? The question will be, how did Canada lock in South Korean battery manufacturing commitment while automotive markets collapsed everywhere else? The answer is sitting in Ottawa right now, analyzing the next strategic relationship that positions Canada's manufacturing base toward resilience instead of dependence. Canada's recent policy direction didn't choose the car, they chose the battery. And Windsor's factory just transformed from automotive partnership to manufacturing permanence because of it. If you're still trying to understand these industrial moves as random business decisions instead of systematic strategic positioning, you're watching the wrong game. Canada's path from resource reliance to manufacturing resilience is accelerating exactly as designed. And Nexstar Energy, fully owned by South Korea's LG, employing 2,500 Canadians in battery production, is what that future looks like when it locks into place.